Hey everyone, it's Peter from Daydream Nation, and I've got my friend from across the ditch in New Zealand, Steve Deluxe. How are you?
Hey Peter, how you going? Yeah, I'm good.
Good to get you back on the channel. Today we are going to talk about a band that started in the new wave of British heavy metal and is kind of ignored and forgotten about. And I am talking about a band called Heavy Pettin. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the first two albums, and there's another album, Rock Ain't Dead, and basically talk about our recollections of the album. Do we like it? Do we don't like it? Maybe some song highlights, and yeah, just talk Heavy Pettin for 30 minutes or so. So I'll just give you a little bit of background and, shoot it across to you, Steve. So Heavy Pettin formed in 1981 in Glasgow, Scotland, and the lineup is basically Steve Heyman on vocals, Punky Mendoza, love that name, on guitars, Gordon Bonner on guitars, Gary Moat on drums, and Brian Waugh on bass. Basically, they did a demo on Neat Records, which is well known for Raven, etc., and they got picked up by Polydor. So the first album, Let and Loose, I think reached number 55 in the UK charts, disappeared 2 weeks later. And then Rock Ain't Dead, that came out in 1985. I think that did worse in the lower 80s in the top 100 of the UK charts. They actually recorded a song for the Eurovision Song Contest in 1986-87. It didn't make it, and then they got dropped by Polydor, and that was the end of Heavy Pettin. They did make a comeback in, I think, 2017. They're still playing around the traps. It's not the full lineup, and I think they did a support to the Michael Schenker group last year. So they're still, actively in the Scotland live music scene and doing the traps. So over to you, Steve. Let's start off with the first album, Heavy Pettin, Let and Loose. What do you think of this album and your first impressions?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one for me, Peter, because, again, just a bit of backstory for me and my sort of history with Heavy Pettin is because I didn't really get into hard rock or metal until 86. Wasn't looking out, didn't know about Heavy Pettin when it came out in 83. And but then once I start getting into this type of music, then I'm looking for all these bands, all these kind of bands that basically, if they have long hair and they have like rock in the title, I mean, I'm in, So so Rock Ain't Dead. This one is actually the first one I heard.
Same.
Fits all my criteria, it's even rock's in the title, long hair, and you just look at the song titles too. It's like, oh yeah, throwing a party and, heart attack. It sounds like it's, but that's all I could go on, back in those days. And it might be in the metal section. Like I see your copy of Rock Ain't Dead has a really cool little hype sticker on it, doesn't it?
Yes, that was the label that they really flogged on a promotional basis in the mid-'80s or the, around 86. So anything that was of the heavy metal genre, they put a little sticker so all the headbangers would just go to the record and pick it up. But
it's a cool sticker. I like that. But that just goes to my point that actually something they kind of did that because people didn't know there's a lot of clues here, right, with the long hair and the song titles and so forth. But it's not on a necessarily heavy metal label, Polydor. So there's when so they're like saying, hey, this is metal. And so I mean, I know we're going to get to this album next. So I heard this and then I went back and I got Letting Loose. And I knew enough about music to know, oh, okay, so Brian May's producing this, helping production, right, with Mac. And so I thought, oh, okay, that's the Queen, a bit of a Queen connection here.
And that was the first time he ever produced an album outside Queen. So that's a huge tick. Big tick.
Yeah. And, they don't sound like Queen. Not really. I mean, they're a hard rock band, I suppose. But I guess it's maybe the fact that maybe Mac signed on to produce and, brought, brought Brian in as well. But, I mean, this obviously new wave of British heavy metal is starting to sort of fade away in '83, but of course, the band that Heavy Pettin get compared to most of all is Def Leppard. And so they're just about to, break really huge with Pyromania, but they've also, they've had some success with their other albums as well. So
High and Dry, etc., etc.
So maybe Polydor's thinking these guys, and I think it really was sort of they were looked upon maybe as being the next Def Leppard, which was a bit unfair because, they're like the new Def Leppard, but Def Leppard hadn't even got old at that point. Def Leppard were just Def Leppard. So I think, and it was interesting too because they kind of denied it. They were like, "Oh, we're not influenced by Def Leppard at all. We're more." They listed a whole lot of other bands, but not so much Def Leppard. But and I guess you could say being put in that new wave of British heavy metal category too may have made people think they were a little bit heavier than what they actually were, because we're not talking Venom or anything like, I don't know if that's a good example, but it's not super heavy. This is melodic hard rock. Some metal elements, but it's raw produced, very commercial.
A little bit raw. It's not overly polished, this first album, comparative to the second album, which we will talk about.
Yeah.
But,
and I think especially too, for a Mac production, he can be pretty. Some of his productions, can be fairly polished. This is a lot more raw, definitely.
A lot raw. I think for me, I'm like you. I first heard Heavy Pettin on a compilation, Metal Mania.
Oh, okay.
It's one of those double disc heavy metal compilations of all these different variety of artists, where they'd put like Canned Heat, Rainbow, and Quiet Riot. Anything that was, a little bit of down tuning or amplified, it doesn't matter. They just throw it in on a heavy metal compilation. And the song that was on this album was Throw a Party. It's not a great song. It's a little bit cliched, but his voice, I liked his voice. I really like Steve Heyman's voice. And it had that sort of, he reminded me a little bit like Biff out of Saxon, but a bit more nasally. And I don't say that in a bad way, but it had a lot of cut through. So I actually saw this in a Brash's record store, and it was in a, like a $5 bin. I picked it up. I didn't like it the first couple of listens, but it really grew on me. And I could see that it had some really nice melodic hooks. And then I went back in time and I got this album. And this is much more meat and potatoes. You've got a little bit of AC/DC, a lot of Def Leppard. And I really think it gives Def Leppard like albums like, and I'll be contrarian, High and Dry and On Through the Night, it gives a run for its money. There's some great songs on this. In and Out of Love, Love on the Run, Victims of the Night. That first side, I mean, side two may drop down a little bit, but side one's outstanding. And you've got three very strong songwriters. You had the vocalist Steve Heyman, Gordon Bonner on guitars, and the drummer Gary Moat. So they, well-crafted songs, and it should have done a lot better. But I've got a theory why it didn't. The cover is kind of naff. If you look at the cover, you've got, a man's hands lifting up these blinds and a woman's hands pulling down the blinds, and you can kind of see the band behind it. It just doesn't make any sense.
I never thought that. You're right. One's a woman, one's a man, right?
It's just ridiculous. You've got an interesting logo, but the back cover is a little bit more interesting, where you've got all these sort of drawings of the band. They could have come up with a better effort, but if you compare it to this album, this looks great. This looks more majestic. It looks like Big Country or U2. It looks like they're ready to go to war of the Clans. This looks like a rock. This looks like a rock band. This looks like this is something that I'd like to hear.
Yeah.
But you look at this album cover, you go, what's this? It's a bit naff.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing, when this got released in America, it had a different cover.
Right.
And also it wasn't called Letting Loose, it was just called Heavy Petting, so it was self-titled. But I'll tell you what, though, the different covers possibly not be any better. So
I will put that up on the screen for our folks to watch at home. I'll track that down.
Obviously I don't have it. I don't have the American version, but and so I think the American version I've heard was remixed a little bit. So even might sound slightly more polished, but different. So I don't know why you would change the title. It's just, but they made it self-titled and a different cover. But like I say, I mean, maybe people can leave their comments on their opinions, but I've only just seen pictures of it, but I'm not sure it's an improvement. But yeah, I definitely agree with you that the next album, the presentation's a lot better, a lot more enticing. Just on the point of the new wave of British heavy metal, they have been lumped in it, but they're a lot more melodic than a lot of the other bands that were sort of put in that sort of genre. And I agree with you. They were kind of on the tail end. They had some pretty high profile support gigs. They supported Kiss. They supported Ozzy Osbourne, but alas, didn't sort of get the traction. And I think from memory, they actually supported Motley Crue in the US when Motley were starting to break big. And that would have been around the Shout at the Devil era. So they're a band that, on paper had all the components, but there was something that wasn't quite right. In and Out of Love, I know that was a single. Viewers, correct me if I'm wrong, that should have got a little bit more rock airplay. Maybe they just needed that better film clip, that better traction. And when you look at them, they look kind of like a Def Leppard band, visually. Yeah. So I'll put a couple of photos up on this show, but visually they're interesting as well. There was a single and had a music video.
And the album was recorded in Townhouse Studios in London, Union Studios, Munich, Germany. So they had some money thrown at them.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, you picked it up cheap. You picked up Rock Ain't Dead cheap. I picked up my copy of Rock Ain't Dead cheap as well. Like this was 87, 88. The band, I think, had split up by this point, so they pressed a lot of copies of it, I think, and
they did. They
expected it to be big, and that's why, even to this day, to some degree, it's not an expensive album to get. Because
they've actually reissued it on I think Cherry Records.
The reissues
they've done some reissues, which I will track down because I like these two albums a hell of a lot. But yeah, look,
they had bonus tracks too, those reissues too. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. Look, first album should have done a lot bigger business, but it just didn't. And, I just probably needed that much more of a push. And again, one of those bands, maybe you don't, you listen with your ears, not your eyes. Because if you're looking at this, you wouldn't sort of, it would have appealed to the AC/DC crowd. I could see it. It would appeal to Saxon. People forget Saxon had a #1 album. Saxon were pretty huge. Maybe 83, they're a little bit on the dip, but there was sort of these little niches that Heavy Pettin could have sort of gone down and sort of garnered more of an audience appreciation.
There were lots of bands from the UK that were given the next Def Leppard tag or were trying to be the next Def Leppard, and it just never happened. There was only really Def Leppard.
I think that's the death knell. I think whoever the wag said this is the new Def Leppard is probably that sunk them. So, so you like this album with the songs, etc. Yeah, you like it?
My favourite song, and it's easily my favourite song, is Rock Me, which actually opens up side 2. I like the way it starts off slow and then really builds. And, that's easily my favourite song. But, some of the In and Out of Love, you talked about Love Times Love. I like those songs.
Yeah, somebody's written on the label. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get it. All titles, 100%. So whoever I bought this album off, this is secondhand, has given it a mark of 100%.
Okay.
That's a good thing. And remember this, home taping is killing music.
Oh, yeah. I'll see if my one's got that, actually.
And it's illegal.
No, it hasn't. I'm allowed to take my one.
They didn't know about MP3s and, 20 years later.
Yeah.
It's the least of their worries. But anyway. All right. Do you want to talk about Rock Ain't Dead?
Yeah, love to. My thinking is they probably thought, well, it's the first album, and record companies were, I think, perhaps more patient back in the day, and they're like, okay, we've built up we've got a bit of momentum. Yeah, it hasn't gone and done a Pyromania, but this is going to be it. This is going to be the Pyromania that definitely a bit of huge at this point now. So, I mean, definitely we're starting to build in 83, but now they're massive. And so, so this album comes out, and like I said, I picked it up cheap. Wasn't necessarily expecting too much, but yeah, I love this album. I mean, I was playing it today, and I've played it a lot over the last few years, but I hadn't played it for a little while, and I was like, oh man, this is such a good album.
It is. It just comes out of the speakers. Beautiful.
You were saying, like, I think for the last album you preferred side 1, and I'm a little bit like this with this album. Side 1 is perfect. Side, like all those 5 songs on side 1. I just love. I must admit, side 2, I don't know the songs as well, and I was playing them today, and not so much. But
awesome. Mate, side 2 probably has their greatest song, in my opinion, Dreamtime. That is a wonderful song. It's a power ballad. That should have been a hit. I could imagine that being in on American radio and battling with the big boys. I'm talking about the AOR, like Foreigner and Journey, and it's that's one of their. I think it's their greatest song. I love it, Dreamtime. And even when I first heard this album, I didn't like it because, as I said, this is one of those albums that's taken a few listens. But yeah, Dreamtime. I really like that song.
Well, I'll go check it out because I mean, it's possible that sometimes the slower songs I disregard a little bit. So yeah.
Don't you reckon the guitarist there just looks a little bit like Kirk Hammett? I don't know. See,
maybe. Yeah. I don't actually. Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, no, I do have that. Yeah.
And see, there's the lead singer. Steve Heyman. He's got the Joe Elliott look.
Yeah, he does. He does.
Yeah. So you can sort of see the comparisons.
Yeah. And you talked about his vocals, because some people don't like his vocals because they're kind of that sort of squealy kind of
nasally.
Sorry, that's the one. Yeah, nasally kind of sound. I heard someone compare him to the vocalist for Helix.
Yes. Look, I like his vocals. I like his vocals, and it's got cut through.
Yeah.
So I have no problem whatsoever.
And it's kind of cool when, like, Aussie's a good example. Sounds quite different. Like, it's different to pretty much anyone else, right? And it's a good. I think he sounds great.
The production on this album is top notch. It's very glossy. It was produced by John Jansen, who did Meatloaf. So I'm talking he had production duties on Bat Out of Hell. So that's pretty 4-star. And you also had Mark Durnley, who's done Haircut 100, DOD, and The Choir Boys. Yeah. So I know you've got a couple of those albums in your collection. Not Haircut 100, but...
No, and John Jansen, I think he did Brittany Fox's first album too. We were talking about them earlier.
Right.
I think he did Brittany Fox. Yeah, so... Interesting thing though too, this album was initially going to be produced by the producer who did the first two Bon Jovi albums.
Right.
Yeah. His name slipped my mind at the moment, but so the guy who was going to do the first two Bon Jovi albums was initially going to be him, Lance Quinn. Yeah, that's it, Lance Quinn. And so it was all teed up to do the album with him, and then he got called out. You know, he decided the second Bon Jovi album was more of a priority, so he went off and did that one. So
he backed the right jockey there, didn't he?
I suppose,
hindsight,
so.
But who knows? Who knows?
I don't think it would have made any difference either way. But
This was recorded in 5 different studios. So Angel Studios, Red Bus Studios, Maison Studios, Roundhouse Studios, and Air Studios in London. To me, that could be 2 things. There's a lot of money they're throwing around, or, oops, we've got a sonic problem here. It's quite unusual that an album is recorded in 5 studios in London. So, hey, I always like these. When you used to get these albums, did you always like it when they used to put the type of equipment? So there it goes, you know, it actually shows the type of drums this guy's used down to the specs.
Yeah.
Remember that was a bit of a thing in the 80s? Like if you wanted to look at a Megadeth album and see what, you know, the actual was on their rig that actually listed out on the sleeve.
I just figured that was more for like musicians would find that interesting. I didn't pay much attention to it, but no, you're right.
But again, all the components here, you got a great album cover. They look majestic. I don't know. Was Throw a Party a single? I
don't think so. I know that.
I
think
hope not.
It might have been the B-side, but Rock Ain't Dead had a music, really quite a fairly decent music video, like, you know, budget-wise and everything like that. It was on MTV. I don't know. It just, they kind of could have. I'm reading sort of some of the things that they've sort of said afterwards. Oh, you know, we didn't get the producer we wanted, and the record company really wasn't. I don't know though. They had, I think, a lot of excuses, but come on, you were given a music video, you were given like a, you know, recording in 4 studios or whatever it is.
Five studios. I think it was all,
all there. The production of the album cover and everything like that, and it seemed to be out in the shops everywhere, hype stickers on it and everything like that. So it doesn't mean it's not a good album. Like I say, I love that album, but it just sometimes these things just don't sell, and
absolutely
not everyone can be number one, and not everyone can have a hit. Yeah.
Well, I will put it down to the first album. I'll go to the album cover. I think that it should have, the first album should have done better, and that would have laid the foundation for the second album doing even better than that.
Yeah.
So I think that I know in those days artists had a lot more time to breathe, but in the world of heavy metal, I guess maybe they didn't have as many chances.
They may have got another chance, but they went and entered Eurovision, and that I think was.
That was a mistake.
That was a mistake. Yeah. Romeo. They did a pretty sappy kind of a song for Eurovision. It didn't win. You know, if it had won, it would have done well. People thought that was a bit of a joke, really, and that didn't help them. And you know, they already had the album recorded, their third album recorded, ready to go. I guess the record company was just lost interest, and then so they sort of just broke up and then so the Big Bang was eventually released on FM Records in 89, but like I said, it had been recorded in 86, 87.
Can you put that up again and maybe just tell the viewers, just a little bit of a summary of what you think of this album, and sonically, what does it sound like? I haven't heard it.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest with you, the production's fine, but it's not a big name production. Producers, Tony Taverner and Adrian Lee, not names I'm familiar with. I mean, it's on FM Records, which, you know, not a big label, but you know, they're known. But I'm assuming initially this was recorded to be on Polydor or Poly, whatever it was. But so it's got some good songs on it. but nowhere near the quality of songs that I feel anyway that was on Rock Ain't Dead. I like.
Is it heavy or is it American orientated rock?
I think it's even less. It's less heavy than their second album. So they're
wow.
It's
it's almost pop metal, is it?
Well, yeah, it's definitely getting that way. I mean, their song Romeo is the second track on the album, and that's not a heavy song. I mean, this is not an album I've played a lot, so I can't really, I'm not really familiar enough with it to sort of go, oh, yeah, this song sounds like this. It's just this basic memory of, Don't Call It Love is a good song. That's a good song. And so it's the kind of thing that actually I won't get the album out. I'll play an MP3 of it or something like that rather than, you know what I mean? It's just, there's a couple of songs that I know, I like to play them sometimes, but otherwise, I mean, it's one song here is called Madonna on the Radio, and
dear.
Yeah, that's the song title, and I don't think it's a good song. Unfortunate, but there we go.
Well, there you go. Well, thanks for that, Steve. I think in summary, maybe wrong time, some decisions that were just not at the right time, at the right place. And it's a good case study just to see a band that probably deserved more success than they got. And look, as far as I'm concerned, these two albums get a fair whack on my turntable. I love them and I play them a lot, and they certainly deserve to get the spotlight, hence this show. So really appreciate the opportunity to join my show and have a bit of a chat about heavy Pettin. And who knows? They're in Scotland. Come down under, do a show.
Maybe. Well, I hope if they ever happen to watch this, I hope they realise that although I'm dismissing their third album a little bit and being a bit critical, we both really love this band and love their
absolutely. They definitely need more recognition.
Yeah. So when you said do this show, do Heavy Pettin, I was like, yes, definitely, because they don't get talked about as much as I think that they should. And I think, a bit of luck, they could have had a hit and they could have been huge, but that's just the way it went. Yeah.
100%. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Tell us what you think about Heavy Pettin and these two albums or three albums. Tell us what you think. Please check out Steve Deluxe on Rock and Metal Invasion. He's got heaps of fantastic clips, lots of, show ideas coming soon. So please give that show some love. And me and Steve will be doing a show very soon. I think we're doing a Badlands show, so watch out for that. I'm really looking forward to that. All right. Thanks, Steve. See you soon. Cheers.